So, Shalini, thanks for finding time for this session. I know we have been working together for almost a year now, and you have been learning a lot about AI. We have been learning a lot from you about the space that you operate in. So, thanks for finding time and looking forward to a fun conversation to know more about you, to know more about Asima Health, and hopefully the audience will love this conversation as well. So, let's start with, for the audience, let's start with if you can quickly define maybe in a minute or two, who is Shalini Gupta? What makes you you?
Wow, that's a big question, Janardhan. First of all, thank you for having me on this platform and being my partner in crime, I would say, because yeah, it's been a tough journey as an entrepreneur. And I think you certainly, or 101 GenAI has definitely played a big role in solving or resolving some of those issues that have come up. So yeah, who is Shalini Gupta? I would say, I've taken a little bit of an unconventional journey, both on a personal and professional level. Just to give you a quick snapshot of some of the unconventional decisions I've made, I've moved to a new country with family at the age of 40. Left my tenured faculty position at IIT Delhi within a month of becoming full professor. And I think now that I look back at that pattern, it kind of tracks because I've done something similar in the past as well. As I was going through my academic journey, made certain decisions which were unconventional and bold, I would say. But yeah, I think overall it has served me well. So let's just say, yeah, good luck going forward.
Interesting. I think change is something, as you said, entrepreneurs, of course, similar journey. I also moved to a different country at certain age, almost at a similar age. One thing that I would say like very different for you and would love to know more about that is your journey from like a professor from academics to entrepreneurship. So can you share a little bit more about what motivated you towards entrepreneurship and more specifically, why Asima Health? Why did you start Asima Health?
Yeah, so I think this jump into entrepreneurship was really not as sudden as it seems to an outsider. I have a very entrepreneurial husband, so I have to attribute some part of the learning over the last, whatever, 10 plus years to him as well, because I've been hearing about his journey, his role, his way of reacting to things. That's one part of it. The other part is also that I have always enjoyed that side of things. And my research area, which is mostly has been in point of care diagnostics, more from an academic R&D, lens. Uh, that has allowed me to explore some of these collaborations with doctors in the clinical setting, and trying to translate some of the fundamental technologies into a more applied domain. So to give you an example, I have had two research spinouts from my past role as a faculty, mostly student led, but those were technologies we translated. So there was a lot of IP handover, doing those negotiations with the institute. I did all of that, and I was one of the first ones to do it in my department. But the idea was that because I was always intrigued by taking things from bedside, from bench, from bench side to bedside, and that was something that always motivated me. So it's something that I thought I would really enjoy. Why I made the transition when I did is because it was a combination of things. It wasn't definitely one decision, but one thing was that I felt I was not able to contribute as much or move as fast or more efficiently when I was in India at where I was. I mean, things were great overall, but you know how things sometimes are in India infrastructurally. There's just some limitations, and I felt that this personal journey would be really really good for Asima Health. To build Asima Health in a way that I could fruitfully contribute to the society. That was number one. Now, there's also a personal side to this story, because in 2017, through an incidental finding, there was a suspicion of ovarian cancer, and I went through an ovarian surgery, which is called an oophorectomy, which basically showed the end result was that they said, oh, I have some borderline results, which means the results are inconclusive, but yeah, I'm at high risk for ovarian cancer, so I need to get myself tested more frequently, and so on and so forth. And as a researcher who had been developing point of care diagnostics or tools for early detection of diseases, I had never ventured out into cancer. And I think subconsciously I started pivoting to cancer as a field, like, diagnosis, therapy. We started working on projects in the lab on this because we had the tools, but we were not applying them. We were applying them more for infectious diseases, not for cancer, because infectious diseases was or is still relevant for India quite a bit. I pivoted in 2020 when a new grad student came to my lab. I was here in Canada, and the lab was still operational. I was on a sabbatical. I asked her to apply some of the techniques that we were working in the lab towards cancer diagnosis, completely as an exploratory project. And the results started coming as really promising. For 1 month, nothing worked. She was always like depressed. And one night she came and she told my postdoc, oh, things are working finally. We had given her 3 cancer samples, 3 healthy samples to play with. We had an inventory of other samples in the freezer. And she said, and it works. I've done some optimization and whatnot. And she said, so the postdoc who had been with me for 6 years in my lab, she went and did the retesting. And when she said, yeah, it works, I was like, okay, now we're onto something. So we started exploring and expanding that data set to more clinical samples, more clinical collaborations, etc. And the rest is history. I mean, once I moved here, I saw this country, Canada, as a good opportunity to translate some of those ideas with a lot more efficiently. And yeah, and so yeah, it's been, the last 4 years have been great, but Asima Health was born little over 2 years ago, and since then we've reached a few milestones that I can talk about. But yeah, that's been the personal journey for how Asima Health started.
What a story! Like the first part was scary. You scared me. I'm sure you scared the audience as well. But what a comeback! Like what a comeback, and what a way to convert an adversity into an opportunity and start something, and not just to like treat yourself or heal yourself, but to build something that will help others. Like very inspiring. I hope you are doing okay. I hope everything is fine, and I hope others benefit from the technology that you are building. Since you also mentioned about a lot of technical breakthroughs within your lab, with your postdoc during your academic, tell me challenges that you faced, and maybe a little bit more around the technical challenge that you are still facing with Asima Health.
Technical challenges are when you're trying to work on a really novel and breakthrough technology, which is deviated from how the liquid biopsy world, if you've heard of that term, liquid biopsy, it's gaining a lot of traction. It's nothing but using body's biofluids, mainly blood, to look for cancer signals. Everybody is using a certain technology, which is a very powerful technology. And for somebody like me who has no commercial, experience, for an academic to come and say, look, I'm going to build a company and fight against all these, not fight against, but kind of set up a competitor, or set up a competitor company which can disrupt this field in a way that we feel we can, that acceptance, too good to be true, can you do it, there's a little bit of I think there's just, the risk becomes high when you come in with a new technology with the little experience that you have. And it's often trying to convince people using the same amount of data that others may have had, trying to convince people that this really works. That has been my technical challenge, because everybody likes the technology. It's not like, nobody will say an early, affordable, accessible, rapid cancer test is bad. Like, nobody will say that, right? Obviously, it's, everybody wants a test like that. That's the holy grail. But the technical feedback is the testing enough? Are the results enough? Is the proof enough? And that's why it's one of the things that we're doing with 101 GenAI is also mitigating some of those risks through comparing our pipeline with what is established as a bioinformatics gene sequencing pipeline, and saying, look, whatever exists in the public database and whatever people have been proposing so far, let us benchmark our technology and see, are some of the claims the same. And actually, we are getting such good data with our recent studies that we are going to publish this very soon in a very top journal. I mean, at least that's the hope. So I think, it's just that I would say that risk probably is something that the technical risk with limited data. And I think that's true for most companies who are starting early, like they have to build more clinical evidence. And I think that's the kind of thing that we're facing. But it's the level is higher because of my background and the kind of technology we're building.
And also, AI makes it easy. Easy. I'm sure no one GenAI makes it easy. But like, kudos to you and your team for like trying to compete or trying to challenge the traditional existing technology and come up with something new. You also mentioned like a few minutes back about certain milestones, certain like publications and everything. Tell me, how do you measure success? How do you track like milestones, patents, partnership, IP? Like for us, it's revenue, for it's growth. I know for you, revenue is far away, but like how do you track success? How do you define milestones and how do you celebrate as a team?
So for us, every clinical sample that we detect or test successfully is a milestone, right? And that doesn't happen continuously for us. It happens in cohorts. So we did one cohort, let's say back in last November, actually finished that around January last year. We're starting another cohort now in October. But what comes in between is product development, because we want to make sure that whatever we were doing in January still holds true in October, right? And so many things change. The environment changes, humidity levels change, temperature changes. Sometimes even the scientist who's doing this work changes. Your product hardware is going through changes. So obviously that's in between. But for us, a personal milestone or a personal will be, okay, does the next cohort show the same performance as the previous cohort? And that's what we do everything for. And obviously IP publication, it's about how do you de-risk the technology, right? How do you protect your technology? So all those are milestones that are a given for a company like mine, or like any diagnostic company or a medtech company, biotech company. It's a given, and we continue to do that. And that publication IP landscape I'm very, very familiar with, because I've had a lot of success on that front, right? That's a part, that's an academic's bread and butter. But what I enjoy most is the product development part, because that's where I'm constantly learning, and that's where the partnerships come through in a form like, you have legal partnerships for IP lawyers and so on, but those are partnerships that mostly I drive the things. Here, where I have lots of partners on the hardware side, like 101 Gen AI, on the AI side, I really enjoy those interactions because it's a constant learning for me,
For
right?
all of
So
us, for all of us.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. So I think the milestones for us is, product development is given. It's like a chef going out to buy vegetables, and that's like product development or all of that. But ultimately, it's a dish that comes through, and for us, that's clinical evidence building. And so far, we've been lucky in previous cohorts that we have tested. The October one that's coming through, that's with Rush Medical Center in Chicago. We have a clinical partnership with one of the PIs, and we want to take this next cohort testing more seriously, because they could become our long-term partners if the results go well, and it helps us validate our technology through a third party. So we're very excited about.
Tell me more about that. So I think so. You're saying some partnership where your product goes to people who would have access to this diagnostic tech. Tell me a little bit more about that. Maybe Shalini, if you can talk about what is the big opportunity? What is the big exciting thing for the company? What is that long-term mission that your company is after? So help us understand like what is your next big milestone and when would Shalini Gupta say that, wow, this is why I started Asima Health and now I see the impact at a global level. So help me understand
Okay,
the
so,
short term as
so
well as the very long-term
yeah,
milestone.
I understand your question, Janardhan. So tell me one thing. So you are in the midst of one of the richest communities, right? Like Silicon Valley. This is this. Have you ever taken a blood test for cancer? Any kind of screening test?
Not yet. My doctor has started reminding with that you can guess my age. My doctor started reminding, but yeah, no test yet. Yeah,
Okay. The test that the doctor is telling you to take is probably not a liquid biopsy test. It's one of
it's
those
not. It's not.
it's probably like a colonoscopy, or a
It is.
like a very invasive test. Okay, so the day I ask you, Janardhan, and your friends in your circle, 10 people, if 10 people in your circle, immediate circle, how many of them at your age and my age, have taken a screening test or a blood test? That day I'll consider it to be a milestone which has to be reached and has reached. And if you can get it in Silicon Valley, right? I went to New York for an event and I asked, and there was lots of like Wall Street people there and so on. I was on the stage and I said, how many people can you show me by, like, raise your hands and show me if you've taken a cancer screening blood test or any kind of a genomic blood test for your, your health. Only two hands went up in 200 plus people who were sitting there. And that's like, I was like right in the midst of like People who can afford these kinds of tests. These
People
are
who
the
can afford, people who have high quality insurance, people who are aware, people who want to live longer, right? So,
early
and
adopters, health, like
yeah,
very health, yeah, like health conscious people. None of them had done it, and the reason is not that people have not tried building such tests. Like, it's been a quest for the last 10 years. People are trying, or even longer probably. But I think there is just a lot of things, like you have to meet multiple things to make a test accessible. It has to be low cost, it has to be high performing, it has to have a low turnaround time. It, like, there's just so many pieces to it. And while some tests can achieve one or two of these, not, it has to like have be for more than one cancer, right? It has to be multi-cancer. Like, all of these different modes are not met with one test, let's say. And early cancer detection is definitely something that none of the companies have been able to achieve thus far. um, so for me, personal success is when my test, or any cancer blood test, of course I would want it to be mine, that every person above the age of 40, or even younger people, because now younger people, as you know, are getting cancer, and no young person wants a colonoscopy, or no younger person wants a stool test. Can my test be the first alternative that comes to their mind, that, oh, I'm going for my routine checkup, which I believe all of us do, right? We go for our annual checkup, routine checkup. Can this be plugged into that routine checkup, right? Just like you would think about a cholesterol test, can that test become relevant? And everybody has that overarching vision, but very few can achieve it, because there is just so much to do, so much to do in this field. And I'm hoping to change that. So for me, that would be a personal milestone.
so that's a bar raiser for the entire industry. So, and you are talking two things. You are talking about democratization, and the second thing I think that you are talking about, at least that's what I understood, is the accessibility, right? Like, you make sure that everyone has access to it, and not just, I know you mentioned New York and Silicon Valley, but like, I think if you bring and maybe I know a little bit more about Sima, if you do it well, then I think it also talks about people who don't have access to even colonoscopy right now. So I think that's the other thing that I see as a big impact and big benefit about accessibility
You're
to these
right.
tests.
Yeah, but let me tell you this, like, most of the liquid biopsy companies that are existing, all they need is a blood sample, right? So in terms of accessibility, you could literally walk into LabCorp or Quest or maybe some other lab, because all you care about is giving your blood and getting results,
Yeah.
right? But if it was as so, it's accessibility for a blood test, any blood test, leave aside Asima's blood test. Yeah, colonoscopy requires a lot of infrastructure for sure. But getting a blood drawn is not really accessible. It's not the accessibility from the perspective of, do I have access to a lab where I can get this done, right? The
So you're saying
accessibility.
blood tests are happening, a lot of other tests from those blood tests are happening, but people are not doing the cancer diagnosis test from those blood
So we
samples.
have to fundamentally ask why that is, right? It's colonoscopy, I can understand. Maybe there's backlog. Maybe like MRI, I know in Canada, at least in Ontario, there's a wait time of like 8 to 9 months, sometimes even more. And I have known people who have lost jobs because of this. They've lost, careers because of waiting for something, because they didn't have a life threatening condition. They had some condition which was not enabling them to work properly, right? But it was so. I'm saying that accessibility for a blood test has to be more than what is available, like a colonoscopy, or what is not available. Rather than that, it's about, can you afford a $4,500 test? Can you afford a $1,000 test every year? Will your like cost be reimbursed for it? Even if you do it, does the clinician want that test done? Because do they trust the data? Do they really believe it adds value to your health? Right? So it has to come at various levels, the accessibility part. So accessibility is a pretty loaded word, because it has cost, it has performance, it has believability, everything. Versus the way we think about accessibility for an MRI or a CT scan, we don't not trust the data for it, right? We assume that it's good enough, even though it may not be.
It's
Accessibility.
trust, credibility, like economies of scale, cost, reimbursements, like culture of getting tested. I think that's another thing that they're right. So there's a lot to that. So I'm glad that you're working that. So kind of switching gears, Shalini, on this, and you touched upon that briefly when you were describing about SEMA and also about our partnership, right? On one hand, you are trying to disrupt this industry. On the other hand, there are a lot of companies, including 101 GenAI, where there's a lot happening in the world of AI, right? Specifically in healthcare AI, there's a lot happening. Let us tell the audience a little bit about the role of AI in what you're trying to achieve at Asima Health, and maybe a little bit more about like we can promote 101 GenAI. So just joking, but yeah, role of AI and role of like this partnership. How does it work? What do you do with AI, and how does it help you solve the problem of democratization and accessibility in the
Yeah. So, AI plays a huge role in liquid biopsy tests in general. So, let me just talk about how AI plays a role in those tests, and then we'll tell you how we are kind of slightly differentiated in how we are using AI. So, most of the times, DNA is a huge molecule, right? Like very long molecule, 3 billion base pairs, and changes can happen anywhere in the DNA. Most of the times it's the scientific discoveries happen with, oh, let me know which part of the DNA changes when and in correspondence to what disease, right? So in case of cancer, let's say you have a certain gene panel that um, is correlated to a certain disease, right? So AI really plays a lot of value in understanding which of those areas in the DNA correlate to a certain disease, because you have like this large data, large population, and you can correlate both to get to some outcome. And that's the bioinformatics pipeline and the use of AI for that. That is very well known. The assay that Asima is building doesn't use any of that sequencing data at all, because the way we work is we have we look at DNA as more like the structural changes in a DNA rather than the sequencing data in a DNA, right? The underlying biochemical changes in the DNA drive the structural change in the cancer DNA, let's say, or in healthy DNA, and our whole job is to bring a huge contrast between those structures using our proprietary technology. So you can almost see us as a threshold based test, like a cholesterol test or a PSA test, which just works on, okay, signal high, you have something, signal low, you have something. It's almost like a threshold based test, almost like a chemistry test or biochemistry test. So AI really is not playing a role in that part, like a yes no part. There's no role of AI as such in our test,
you
but
do in your lab, that you do in your
that we
lab
do in
and
our
things.
lab.
Correct.
Correct. And we have done that, and we have done some, we have proof of concept data for that. AI doesn't play any role in that. So a yes no test, binary outcome, great. Even that's valuable, okay. But being ambitious as we are, we said, we have all this data, like patient data, their age, their demographics, their medical history, what not. Can we use AI to do something more than just a binary output, like a yes no, right? So can we use this data to predict a person's stage of cancer, right? Which is currently not done with a blood only test at all, right? That staging is usually done using sort of histopathology, or even through scans you can find the stage of a tumor, right? Like depending on the size of the tumor, you can say, okay, look, this is more advanced. Nobody has really attempted it using a blood only test. So the way we are doing this is we are using this large data from patients to look for maybe cancer staging, or in future for risk stratification, right? So if somebody comes in and they have some signals based on whatever their personal profile, we should be able to tell them, do they need an MRI like faster than somebody else who doesn't, right? So just this risk stratification strategy can also come with AI. And yeah, I mean, I think a lot can be done, even looking for tissue specific patterns. Probably AI can play a role. So we're just getting started. We're playing around again, exploring in the field. That's what we enjoy best. And let's see if something emerges, through this.
And then you have in-house team for AI. How do you go about it? Do you go to ChatGPT? Do you go to Claude? Like, how do you go about it?
Yeah, Chat GPT I use a lot.
Just
Even
joking. Yeah, good.
everybody says you shouldn't be using it, but I'm saying everybody secretly does use it, right? So let's just put it out there. We do use it, right? But the hardcore AI part, obviously, you're helping us build that. And we have hired not an AI specialist, but somebody who does AI or understands AI better than I do. So we are now, through her, we are trying to understand how we can bring this technology in house and have some of those models in house so that we can work on them and make them better. The idea is to have a fully automated platform where we start with the patient's blood, and at the end get a report out which doesn't require interpretation of any clinician, right? And AI will play a good role in that, in the sense that that could be staging information and whatnot. It doesn't require interpretation from a clinician, and that whole AI, Asima test, including the AI pipeline, can help guide that. So Yeah, so we require hand holding for sure at this point. But as the team grows, who knows? We might have like a full AI, yeah, vertical within the team. Not at this stage. We're very small at this point.
Definitely, definitely. I think like it's a combination of science and some AI experiments that you're doing. And I think right now with your background, you're more focused on like getting those signals and AI part. I think is something that is evolving. We are also seeing across various customers that part is evolving. The models are evolving, the accuracy is evolving. So I'm sure your AI roadmap will also evolve with time on that. So with that, let me switch to a different section. Before that, I'll tell the audience some fun fact about this conversation. So when Shalini was explaining about the biochemistry, the biology, it reminded me of school days, and it reminded me that Shalini and I went to the same school, same class. Of course, she was good at biology, I was not, and I could clearly realize that. But I'm glad that we are working together on that. So that's a little bit fun fact about me and Shalini. We knew each other for so many years, and when I started 101 GenAI, around the same time Shalini started Asima Health, and then I think that this partnership just happened because of two different people trying to solve two different problems, but very very complementary problems. So thanks for this partnership, Shalini. So with that, let's move to the fun section. Love the vision, love the aspiration, love the technology that we are building. Let's move to a little bit on the fun side, and then with fun, I would say I'll not make fun of anything that you're doing at Asima Health. Let's go into a little bit on your past journey. Let's start with this is something that I learned as an entrepreneur, that failure and fun. I think we start to make fun of the like situations where things did not go well, right? And that's where we learned the most. So tell me one scenario, maybe two scenarios, where there was a failure and eventually it turned out to be the greatest lesson, the greatest teacher, or maybe the funniest moment that you still talk about.
Oh boy, so I haven't given this enough thought, but I'll tell you one. I don't think it was fun, but it was definitely a big learning curve for me. So I had a student, right? The student, graduate student who had just joined in 2020. She started working on this technology. And with my move and resignation and starting a new company and IP transfer, things got delayed. Obviously, they get delayed, right? So, and I was her primary advisor, and she joined. I was here for sabbatical, and I decided to kind of not go back. And so there was a little bit of handover happening and so on. So she was already, she did suffer because of all of this decisions that I had to go through. So through the process, her PhD publication got delayed because I couldn't publish some of this work. So just working from two different geographies in two different time zones, trying to navigate this IP transfer, these kinds of negotiations, even the technology transfer, the knowledge transfer from a person who I had never met, right? Uh, was one of the most difficult tasks for me because no two people were like, both were incentivized to get the technology out, but the incentives were slightly different. For her it was publication, maybe for me it was patent and technology. And the biggest learning curve for me in this whole process was building relationships. As an entrepreneur, we want to run fast, right? It's I was always taught this: when you're running in a group, you slow down, right? That's why you put blinders on a horse, because you want them to run alone
Particular direction, yeah.
in a particular direction. And entrepreneurs are kind of, they have to put blinders on because there's just so much noise. I think it's a combination that I learned is like putting those blinders on, but still taking people with you. That balance of running fast, but being a true leader, getting people together. I think that for me, and that's all about building relationships, right? So I have now started my conversations in a very different tone than what I started. That's number one. And the second fun thing that for me may be fun, it's very nerdy, I would say, is that in science, when we make presentations, we keep one technology on why and the remaining slides are on how, right?
Yeah.
This is why it's
I've never
important.
made those presentations, so
You've
I'm
never
glad.
made them.
Okay,
But
yeah.
in an academic setting, you always start, oh, I'm doing like, okay, let's say fuel cells. Or this is where a fuel cell or a battery can be used for. Like that's the first slide. And then you all go into equations and like more technical stuff, like how it works and so on. Here, when I started making decks, I realized that it's a completely inverted structure, because here nobody cares about how the technology works. Why it works is the most important thing. And so for me, that was a huge learning curve, that it was a completely reverse structure. There's only one slide on how it works. Nobody cares about your product. What can it do for me is what you need to explain better. So I think that mind shift took me a little bit of time. But yeah, just building those relationships and now approaching things from a perspective of, or not, I want to get this thing done, right? Which was always my approach, because I want to run fast and I want things to happen in a certain way, or my way, let's say, in a certain way when I say this. And that is often not the case, because things are not such black and white. And I think just learning that, because when people are I mean, through my student, I learned this, that it was unfortunate what happened. We are on very good terms now. I'm not saying that, but took a lot of hardship and navigation to get that knowledge transfer done from a person who had built the technology, and then I wanted to scale it. So yeah, so just small
I agree.
snippet that I.
I agree. I would say that is the biggest lesson for most of the entrepreneurs, and we keep meeting. I've been an entrepreneur for quite some time now. I keep meeting entrepreneurs. I think we realized very early that there's only so much that we can do alone, and we are all used to in school, college, and everything to just do it on run on our own. And in fact, like I have a 5-year-old daughter, Shami, you know that. Like I was watching this movie Mufasa, and then there's a song, right? Like if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, then go together. I think collaboration is important.
Yes.
Unfortunate that it came through some struggle, but I think that lesson is important. The other thing that you said about no one cares about technology, I don't agree with that. Investors do care about technology.
No, no, it's not like no.
Just joking, just joking. Yeah. So I think people do care about technology, but I think it's mainly about there's something that I also learned, because you transition from academics to entrepreneurship. I transition from technology, like an engineer, to entrepreneurship. I think here we don't lead with tech. Tech is just an enabler, is what we learned. I think what we
Correct.
lead with is what is the business problem, what is the impact that we are creating,
Yes.
how are we doing it, instead of like what is the cool IP behind it, right? So there are great companies built without IP. There are great companies built with like some or little tech. So I think business impact, ROI takes higher priority over the behind the scenes pure play technology. Totally agree with that. So that switching gears to like from failure to success. I know you're a humble person, but tell me one thing, and then something that you are really proud about, something where there's a success story that if you ever write a book, it would go there. Like what is that? What is that one story that you would want your daughter to know? You would want everyone else to know?
Uh, I mean, one story, success story, I don't know if I would call it a success, but I think what has made my life simpler in terms of taking decisions is I don't look in terms of forward. I look into, like, I look backwards. I kind of project myself 40 years, hoping I'd live that long. I kind of go in that time zone and think about whether my decision today will make an impact on that 85-year-old or 80-year-old person. To me, that's most important. And that has helped me make decisions which are, like I said, unconventional, right? So I don't know whether they're successful or not. I would not measure them that way, but the fact that I had the courage to do something like this, leave my job, everybody, including my dad, if he was alive, he would have said, what are you doing? You're like, this is the most foolish decision you're making. But I could do that because I was like, if I don't do that now, and I look back at myself, I would never be able to achieve this. And that's what I tell my daughter as well. Like, don't take yourself, or like, don't take yourself so seriously. Like, she comes and worries about the littlest of things, and I tell her, like, really, is this thing a thing to worry about? And I hope I can instill that to her, like in her, because I think just people take themselves too seriously, or their lives or everything that they do too seriously, and we are like minuscule. So I just have a zoom out way, like project or zoom out, so that decisions can be made more easily. So I think that's something I've learned over time. I don't know whether you call it success or not, but yeah, if you do it that way, everything seems like successful, right? You
Listen,
feel like.
I think that's very deep, and that's very meaningful. In fact, with this conversation, I realized that maybe I also zoom out. I also zoom out, and any decision that we make, be it at home, be it at work, I think I always have this thing that how would this decision impact like life 10 years from now, not just for my life, but life around, right? And then that helps. But I think you give me a better perspective, think bigger, and think like 40, 50 years, and look backward from there instead of
And you can do it for smaller things also, Janardhan, like even for shopping. Like I used to, like, I'm not an impulsive buyer, but even when I go for shopping and I kind of give myself two scenarios. If I didn't have this thing, would it matter? No. And then it makes it so easy not to buy something, right? So you can implement these, like, it's not just in job, career, or things like that, but even day to day, I feel like providing yourself scenarios like, this is a conventional way to do it, but okay, let's think of other scenarios and think of them 40 years from now. Does it make a difference? Like we used to, like with these half yearly exams and things, we used to cry and run, oh, we got lost one mark here and there.
Yeah,
These things don't even matter, but they were so important at the time when we
at that
when we
point of
were going through them, right? So I feel like that zooming out thing really, really
is
makes things,
important.
yeah, is important. And retrospectively, if you look at everything will think like, oh yeah, it was a success or a failure. But at the time when you took that decision, if you took it boldly enough and were able to justify it, I think that's a success, right?
That's a
Then
success.
you feel successful at every step of the way. It's not like you're waiting for something successful to happen. Like the fact that you
Definitely.
did it, like you thought about it and did it fearlessly, I think that's a success. So
Very
yeah,
interesting.
I think
Very
of it.
interesting. Your definition of success is stop chasing success, think very long term, think like, retrospectively whether what you're chasing makes sense. So that's very meaningful. Uh, Going back to Asima Health, on one hand, you are like, you have some ambition, some aspiration for what you want to achieve with Asima, which needs a growth mindset. There's a personal life, there's a family. How do you strike a balance between the fun and the personal life and the growth mindset that you need for Asima Health? And how do they fuel each other?
I am a workaholic. I have to admit that. And I love working. I love working. Like, I just love the fact that sometimes, even when weekends come, I'm like, why have the weekends come? So I used to be a fun person. I'm no longer a fun person. At least that's what I feel. That's one thing that has changed in me because I don't know. I just love my current work so much. And academic part also. I used to work a lot when I didn't really need to because I just liked it. So I'm trying to train myself to compartmentalize the hours a little bit because yeah, I think that's the right way to lead life. Not for myself because I like what I'm doing, but I think for others and your family members, that's the right thing to do, right? They need your time as well. I did mention that my husband is also an entrepreneur, so we have two startups at home and very, very
Not one.
erratic work style. Like we work whenever, it's like a hostel, right? So we work whenever we want to. And our daughter is now old enough to appreciate or maybe tolerate that lifestyle a
I'm
little
sure
bit.
she'll be doing a startup soon, like in school itself, right? So
Yeah, she's doing a business lesson. But just to break that monotony, we do travel a lot. So for the last 10-15 years, and this is mostly driven by my husband, like he does most of the planning, every 3 months we take a trip. Okay. So every time we end a trip, our next trip is already planned. And so that breaks the monotony a little bit. And then the weekends I like to I look like all the like I don't know, like housewife things. I love to do those. I love cooking, gardening, and all of that. So I think that just calms me down. So I do a lot of that, and sometimes alone, not as with people, but not with family. But yeah, it's a mix of fun and work, I would say.
I would summarize, you love to work. That means you have chosen a good profession of entrepreneurship. You take vacation every 3 months. That means either every board meeting is at a new location or you go for travel after board meeting. Looks like you have got it all sorted. Let's move to a couple of like the closing section of this podcast. Uh, Talk about certain books that you read, certain podcasts that you listen to. I know you and I in our personal conversation have spoken a lot about like certain spiritual topics, but anything that you want to share with the community here, mainly around founders and maybe people who are in health tech, medtech, biotech space. What do you recommend reading? What do you recommend them to follow?
Yeah, I mean, I used to read a lot. I do read, but I'm not. I don't follow a particular genre. I would say in general, I enjoy nonfiction a lot. I used to read a lot of fiction until I don't know, like undergraduate years. But I've shifted to fiction, and shifted to nonfiction, and I read and consume a lot of things about mind body uh, associations, general about health. I just about how atomic habits help or break our long term goal. I think a lot of the ailments that we have, for example, are more here than than actual ailments, like people who have backaches. My husband, for example, has a huge backache problem, but I feel like it's connected to something in his childhood, right? So just looking at those kinds of relationships, I love consuming that, that material. And I consume anything and everything that comes on the internet, mostly from, you know, yeah, like more endorsed sources. But I read a lot about that. 4 years, or actually 2016 is when I started consuming a lot of spiritual stuff also. When a student came to me, actually incidentally in 2016, a person came to me, a student, and said, I won't be able to take your classes beyond October because I'm leaving engineering or something like that. I'm dropping a semester because I want to go and learn about inner engineering from Sadhguru and so on and so forth. And Sadhguru is a big mystic in India, a big public speaker who talks a lot about managing your mind, body, and spirituality in general. And I said, who's Sadhguru? And he introduced me to that. So I went and Googled Sadhguru, who's that person? Like somebody's leaving their engineering course in a coveted institute. This person must be important. And I started listening to him, and I've now moved on from him to other people, but I have started consuming a lot of spiritual text around old Vedantic traditions of India. And sometimes I immerse myself for 3 hours while I'm cooking. I just have my podcast on. I'm not going to say who I listen to. I can if you want me to, but I listen to a certain person. And yeah, I think it has given me a lot to think about. So much so that I had to distant myself from that podcast, because I was just getting too deep into it at one point. So yeah, so it's
So
a yeah.
maybe that's what gives you energy. Maybe that's what gives you energy, and maybe that's where all the previous answers that you gave connect, right? That like don't
Calms
chase
me.
success thing where it calms you down, and
Yeah, it
you don't
calms me.
need breaks every Friday evening. You don't have to go out party to energize. Uh, all
No,
those
but
things, right?
speaking of coffee breaks, one thing I do, and I think this is for your listeners if they do it, I take power naps. So people who go for coffee breaks, I work from home, so I have the luxury of a bed close by, right? So I actually go for 5-minute power naps. I don't consume coffee at all. And that really that really helps. Try it. I will say try
Interesting. So
it.
if you're listening, don't drink coffee. Go and take power nap. Don't fight sleeping. Just sleep. Okay.
That's the best way to energize yourself or re-energize yourself, I would say.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Last question, and maybe like I don't want you to disclose the name, but any specific founder, entrepreneur that inspires you a lot, and like you follow that founder's philosophy, that entrepreneur's philosophy, or you connect with that person?
Yeah, so Naval Ravikant, the founder or co-founder of Angel List, I actually I started reading or listening to him, or read his book also. I think it's called The Almanac of Naval
Oh my
Ravikant,
God.
right? So I started reading it quite late in life, like maybe 2 years ago, but I felt that there was a lot of resonance in his thoughts and mine, and I really really benefited also, like lots of new things that I learned from him. So one particular example I can give you is, initially when I didn't go to events, I never wanted to go to events. I'm not a very, I'm not, I tend to just be on my own a little bit more. But I know I see all these founders going to events, and maybe for them it's important, but one has to question, is it important for me? And Naval Ravikant, when I heard him and he said, I've stopped going to events completely. It just kind of, I don't know, like just reiterates what you're thinking and helps you make that decision. It makes it easier because I'm like, okay, there's somebody else who's doing the same thing. So I think some of those thoughts have resonated with me a lot. And I'm not saying all of them are right in every context, but for me, it has worked. So yeah, I think I listen to him, or people like him, like who have similar kinds of philosophies. And so yeah, that's one person I really enjoy listening to.
I also personally, so for the audience, like we are talking about elements of Naval Ravikant. He talks about striking a balance between wealth and happiness. That's, I
Yes.
think, written by Tim Ferriss. My favorite book and my favorite podcast. Whenever, like like I would say every year I listen to it. So it's very interesting, and I agree with you. Thank you so much, Shalini. Like, going from like knowing Shalini to knowing Asima to again going knowing and getting to know Shalini a little bit more, even though I know you for so many years. Should also again like I and I hope the community, this AI in healthcare community, this 101 GenAI community, would get some inspiration from what you are doing. All the best for what you are building, and hopefully you achieve your vision of democratizing this diagnostic, and people should have access to it all over the world. So thank you so much, and look forward to working with you on this.
Thank you, Janardhan, for having me. Bye.
Bye.